So one way to achieve layer one scaling is to increase the block size.
Yes.
Hence the block size wars, quote unquote. And you actually tweeted something about people are saying that Vitalik changed his mind about he went from being a small blocker
it went from
to
being big to small.
big to small.
To them.
And but you said I've been a medium blocker all along. So maybe you can also comment on the very basic aspect before we even get to sharding of where you stand on this block size debate.
Sure. So the way that I think about the trade-off is I think about it as a trade-off between making it easy to write to the blockchain and making it easy to read the blockchain. Right. So when I say read, I just mean, have a node and actually verify it and make sure that it's correct and all of those things. And then by write, I mean send transactions. So I think for decentralization, it's important for both of these tasks to be accessible. And I think that they're about equally important, right? If you have a chain that's too expensive to read, then everyone will just trust a few people to read for them. And then those people can change the rules without anyone else's permission. But if, on the other hand, it becomes really expensive to write, then everyone will move on to basically second layer systems that are incredibly centralized. And that takes away from, decentralization and self-sovereignty as well. So this has been my viewpoints pretty much the whole time, right? It's that you need this balance, and going in one direction or the other direction is very unhealthy. In the Bitcoin case, basically what happened was that Bitcoin originally, at the very beginning, it didn't really have a block size. It just had an accidental block size of 32 or a block size limit of 32 megabytes, because that just happens to be the limit of the peer-to-peer messages. But then,
interesting. I didn't even know that part.
Yeah, but then Satoshi back in 2010 was worried that even 32 megabyte blocks would be too hard to process, so he put the limit down to 1 megabyte. And I think by
put, you mean sneaked in there?
Yeah, just made an update to the Bitcoin software that made blocks bigger than one. I think it's 1 million bytes invalid. And I think the impression that most people had at the time is that, this is just a temporary safety measure. And over time, as we become more confident in the software, that limit would be raised somewhat. But back then, when the actual usage of the blockchain started going up, and then it started going up first to 100 kilobytes per block, then to 250 kilobytes per block, then to 500 kilobytes per block, there started kind of coming out of the woodworks this opinion that no, that limit should just not be increased. And then there were all of these attempts at compromising, right? First there was a proposal for 20 megabyte blocks. Then there was the 248 proposal, which is a bit ironic because the 248 proposal started off being a small block negotiating position. But then when the big block people came back and said hey, aren't we going to do this? They're oh, no, we don't want the block size increases anymore. So there were these two different positions, right? The small blockers, I think they valued 1 megabyte blocks for two reasons. One is that they just really, really believe in the importance of being able to read the chain. But two is that a lot of them really believe in maintaining this norm of never hard forking, right? So the difference between a hard fork and a soft fork is basically that in a soft fork, blocks that were any block that's valid under the new rules was still valid under the old rules. So if you have a client that verifies according to the old rules, then you'll still be able to accept the chain that follows the new rules. Whereas with a hard fork, you have to update your code in order to stay on the chain. And they have this belief that soft forks are kind of either less coercive than hard forks, which, by the way, I completely disagree with. I actually think soft forks are more coercive because, basically they force everyone who disagrees to sort of go along by default. Or they have this opinion that there's it's more difficult to abuse soft forks to do really mean things or that completely violate people's expectations, increasing the supply, which is I think there is some truth to that. So because of these reasons, they just say we're only going to do soft forks, and we want to just not do any hard forks. And they eventually discovered this idea called segregated witness that allows for a very tiny block size increase to the equivalent of about 2 megabytes with a soft fork. It's just really weird and devious trick. Like basically what they do is they take the signatures of transactions and then they put them outside of the block, and then they add an extra rule that says that like for a block to be valid, the block has to come with a separate, like basically extension block that contains all of the transaction signatures. Right. So, when you measure it according to the old rules, like, hey, it adds up to less than 1 million, but actually there's this extension block that the old protocol doesn't even know about. So
it's a hack that seemed to work to in a small way extend the size of the block size.
But so, small block size was like happy with these very low levels of block size, and then the big block size wanted to expand to, at the very least go to 4 megabytes, then, maybe 8, 20. There's disagreements within there as well. I definitely was favoring the big side the whole way through, as you can probably tell. But
even though, so the argument against the big is that it makes things more centralized.
Yes, because fewer people can run a node that verifies the chain, and also because any of these things would require a hard fork, and hard forks are inherently risky.